What if a simple act of kindness could change someone's day forever? When Keanu Reeves notices a pregnant woman working hard at a gas station, his shocking response will leave you amazed. The night in Los Angeles was wrapped in a melancholic hush. A light drizzle fell steadily, shimmering under the red and blue neon lights of a quiet gas station. For most, it was just another night, another stop for fuel before heading home. But for Megan, that gas station was more than a pit stop, it was survival. 7 months pregnant, she moved with urgency between the pumps, her breath visible in the cold night air. She wiped windshields, checked oil levels, and filled tanks for customers who barely acknowledged her existence. Her thin jacket was no match for the chill that seeped into her bones, but she didn't have time to think about that. She couldn't afford to. Tonight's paycheck was the only thing standing between eviction. Just a few more hours, a few more cars, and she could hold on for one more month. Across the station, sitting under the station's awning, her 8-year-old daughter, Lily, was hunched over a tattered activity book. Her tiny fingers clutched a worn red pencil, her face full of quiet concentration as she sketched intently. Next to her lay 2 other pencils, one blue, one yellow, both whittled down to nearly nothing. Yet, even with so little, Lily focused with a determination beyond her years, filling the pages with images that carried silent dreams. The low, distinct hum of a powerful engine rolled through the station. A sleek black motorcycle glided to a stop at one of the pumps. Keanu Reeves, dressed in a black leather jacket and helmet, moved with effortless precision as he dismounted. He removed his helmet, shaking out slightly dampened hair, and glanced around. Something about the place, about the people, made him pause. His eyes found Megan first. The way she moved, her exhaustion evident in the slight hesitation of her steps. But it was her resilience that stood out. Despite the weariness lining her features, she maintained a polite smile as she worked, treating every customer with the same quiet courtesy. Then, his gaze shifted to Lily, engrossed in her drawing as if she were creating something of great importance. Curious, Keanu stepped closer. He crouched slightly beside the little girl and tilted his head to see her work. It was a simple but detailed drawing, a cozy kitchen with steaming pots on the stove, a small table at the center, and a counter with a blank sign hovering above it. Keanu studied the careful strokes, noting how she had left one section unfinished. "Do you like to draw?" he asked gently. Lily looked up, startled by his presence, but nodded shyly. "I draw places I want to go." Keanu smiled. "And this place, what is it?" Lily hesitated. Her small fingers squeezed the red pencil, her eyes flicking back to the empty space in her drawing. Before she could answer, Megan's voice broke the moment. "Lily, don't bother the gentleman, sweetheart." Her tone was polite, but there was an edge of tiredness behind it. "She's not bothering me," Keanu reassured, looking at Megan with an easy calm. "I was just learning about her drawing. About the places she wants to see." Megan gave him a quick, cautious glance before a sharp honk from another car interrupted them. Instinctively, she turned to assist the next impatient customer, leaving Keanu standing with Lily. He watched as Megan walked away, her posture stiff, the weight of her pregnancy pressing into her movements. His eyes flickered back to the unfinished drawing in Lily's lap. Something about it lingered in his mind, something deeper than just pencil strokes. The last windshield of the night had been wiped, but Megan's movements had slowed significantly. Every step sent a wave of pain through her lower back, a constant reminder of the child grown within her. She forced herself to ignore it. There was no room for weakness, not when survival depended on her strength. The final customer pulled away, leaving the station momentarily empty. Megan leaned against one of the pumps, letting out a quiet breath, her eyes fluttering shut for just a moment. She wasn't just tired, she was utterly drained, physically and emotionally. Across the lot, Lily noticed. She put down her red pencil and looked toward her mother. "Mama, are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft, almost uncertain. Megan quickly pulled herself upright, forcing a smile as she made her way to the small chair beside her daughter. "I'm fine, sweetheart, just a little tired," but Keanu, who had been standing a short distance away, had seen the hesitation in Megan's expression. He took a step forward. "Excuse me," he said carefully, his voice gentle. "Do you need help with something? You seem tired." Megan turned sharply, caught off guard by his concern. Instinctively, she shook her head. "Thank you, but I'm fine. Just a little back pain. It's normal for pregnancy." Keanu's brow furrowed slightly. Normal shouldn't mean constant. Something in his tone made Megan pause. It wasn't pity. It wasn't intrusive. It was genuine concern, something she hadn't heard in a long time. She looked away, staring at the damp pavement. "There's not much to be done," It's just part of life. Keanu didn't press further, but he noticed the way she subconsciously supported her lower back as she sat. He crouched slightly, keeping his voice steady. Do you do this every night? Megan nodded, her gaze distant. 2 nights a week here. Mornings I clean offices. Is what pays the rent, keeps Lily in school. Keanu was silent for a long moment, processing what she had just shared. And when do you rest? He asked softly. Megan let out a small, humorless laugh. Rest? I don't really have time for that. Bills don't wait. And with the baby coming, I need to work even more. There's no choice. Keanu exhaled quietly, his jaw tightening. It shouldn't have to be this way. Megan finally met his gaze. Her eyes, filled with exhaustion, held a mixture of pride and quiet defeat. But it is. At least for me. She glanced at Lily, who was watching them both intently. I made choices that brought me here. Complaining doesn't help. I just have to keep going. Lily, who had been listening silently, reached for her mother's hand. She squeezed it tightly. You do everything for me, Mama? Megan smiled down at her daughter, but her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. The night air grew colder, the drizzle intensifying as the neon lights flickered against the damp pavement. Keanu stood still, watching Megan's silhouette as she moved with quiet resilience, her hands gripping the fuel pump as she tended to another customer. The exhaustion in her movements was evident, but it wasn't just fatigue. It was something deeper, something etched into her bones. She carried the weight of survival on her shoulders, pushing forward because she had no choice. Lily, still sitting on her small plastic chair, peeked up from her drawing. She watched her mother intently, sensing the silent burden Megan tried so hard to conceal. Keanu knelt beside her, his voice gentle but firm. Your mom works a lot, doesn't she? Lily nodded, gripping the worn red pencil tightly between her small fingers. She cries sometimes when she thinks I'm asleep, Lily murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Keanu felt a pang in his chest, the words cutting through the cold night like a knife. Why does she cry? He asked, though deep down he already knew the answer. Lily hesitated, then pressed the red pencil harder against the page, her small hand moving with force. Because she's tired, she said finally, her voice laced with something far too heavy for an 8-year-old to carry. She paused, then added, and because like Mama said, Papa left when he found out about the baby. The way she said it matter-of-factly, without emotion, made Keanu's jaw tighten. He didn't respond immediately. Instead, he glanced back at Megan, who was now leaning against the gas pump for a brief moment of relief. She didn't cry, didn't complain. She simply kept going. And in that moment, Keanu knew he couldn't just walk away. The station grew quieter as the last few cars rolled away, leaving Megan standing by the register, rubbing her lower back as she gathered her things. She was used to this, the ache, the exhaustion, the silence of the world moving on without noticing her. Keanu took a deep breath, then approached her carefully. Can I ask you something? His voice was soft, steady, as if he were testing the waters of a fragile truth. Megan turned slightly, clearly surprised by his continued presence. She hesitated but finally nodded. Sure. He studied her for a moment before asking, if you could have one chance, just one, to do something different, what would it be? Megan blinked, caught off guard. The question hung in the air between them, almost too big to answer. She looked down, staring at the damp ground beneath her worn shoes, her breath slow and deliberate. I don't know, she admitted, her voice quieter than before. I don't think I can afford to think like that anymore. Keanu didn't respond immediately. He let the silence stretch, giving her the space to acknowledge a truth she had buried long ago. There's no room for what-ifs when you have bills to pay and children to raise, she finally added, shaking her head as if to dismiss the thought entirely. Keanu nodded, understanding the years of sacrifice hidden behind her words. I imagine you've had to give up a lot. Because of that. Megan let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Giving up? That's not the right word, she said. It's more like life just doesn't allow certain things. You can't dream when you're barely making rent. Lily, who had been quietly listening, lifted her gaze from her drawing and looked at her mother. But you still cook, Mama, she said softly. And you make the best lasagna in the world. A tired chuckle escaped Megan's lips, a sound tinged with sadness. Making lasagna at home and running a restaurant are two very different things, sweetheart. Keanu tilted his head slightly, his curiosity piqued. But you've wanted a restaurant, haven't you? Megan's body went still. She didn't answer at first, as if the thought had caught her off guard. Then, in a voice almost too quiet to hear, she whispered, Yes. Can you notice the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes stayed locked on the horizon, as if looking too closely at the past might hurt? When I was younger, before all of this. Before Malik. Keanu caught the way her voice shifted when she said the name. He didn't press, but she could sense his silent question. She exhaled, her breath shaky. When we got married, we dreamed of opening a restaurant together. Her fingers absentmindedly traced the edge of the counter. He used to say I had a gift, that my love for food was special. She swallowed hard, as if pushing the words past a lump in her throat. But after Lily was born, things changed. It got harder. She hesitated, then added, and when I found out I was pregnant, Dan, he left. Keanu clenched his jaw, feeling a sharp, unspoken anger rising in his chest. He looked down at Lily, who was still clutching her red pencil, her small fingers pressing into the wood, as if trying to hold onto something solid in an unstable world. He said he couldn't handle another burden, that he didn't want another responsibility. And then, he just walked away. Megan let out a slow breath, as if releasing a weight she had carried for far too long. She didn't cry. She had cried enough. Lily reached for her mother's hand, squeezing it tightly. You do everything for me, Mama. Megan smiled at her daughter, but Keanu could see the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the silent question she had never dared to ask out loud. Was it enough? A car horn blared from pump 2, jolting Megan out of the moment. Instinctively, she straightened, pulling herself back into work mode. Excuse me, sir. Duty calls. She walked away before Keanu could say anything, her posture stiff, her steps slower than before. He noticed the slight limp in her right foot, the way she favored one side to ease the pain in her lower back. The weight of her pregnancy was evident, yet she never paused for long enough to acknowledge it. Keanu turned back to Lily, who had returned to her chair. The little girl still held her red pencil, but her eyes followed her mother with a quiet concern that no child should have to carry. Keanu crouched beside her again, keeping his voice low. Your mom works really hard, huh? Lily nodded, pressing her lips together. Keanu took a slow breath, looking between the mother and daughter. He didn't have all the answers yet, but one thing was certain. What he was about to do would change everything. If you find these stories inspiring and they motivate you to take action, please comment 9. If not, comment 0. Your feedback means a lot to us. Thank you for your valuable time. The morning air carried the crisp promise of change. Megan stood behind the counter of the gas station, sorting receipts and preparing to leave when the low, familiar rumble of a motorcycle engine filled the air. She turned instinctively, her heart pounding slightly in her chest. It wasn't a coincidence. Lily, still drawing at her small plastic chair, perked up at the sound, her bright eyes flicking toward the entrance. Keanu was back. He pulled into the same pump as the night before, dismounted his motorcycle with a sense of purpose, and strode toward them with 2 large paper bags in his hands. He moved with the kind of confidence that told Megan this wasn't just a casual visit. Good morning, he greeted, his voice steady and warm. Megan crossed her arms, still wary despite her exhaustion. You actually came back, she said, more a statement of disbelief than a question. Keanu smiled slightly. I said I would. Lily, unable to hold back her curiosity, leaned forward toward the bags. What's in there? She asked excitedly. Keanu set the bags on the counter and turned to Megan. Before you say anything, just look. He carefully opened the bags, revealing fresh groceries, a few new clothes for Lily, and at the very top a brand new box of colored pencils. Lily gasped, clutching the pencils as though they were a chest full of gold. Pencils. She squealed, hugging the box to her chest. Thank you, mister. Megan stared at the scene, her throat tightening. She wasn't sure what to say. Her daughter's joy was undeniable, but Megan wasn't used to accepting kindness. She wasn't sure how to process it. Keanu saw the hesitation in her eyes. I know what you're thinking, he said gently, but this isn't charity. It's just a little help, a push to make things a little easier. Megan shook her head, struggling with the mix of emotions fighting within her. I don't know if I can accept this, she murmured. Without a word, Keanu reached into his jacket and placed an envelope on the counter. Megan eyed it warily. This is for rent. Just for this month, Keanu said simply. Before she could protest, he pulled out one more thing, a slightly crumpled flyer. He handed it to her. Megan read it, her brows furrowing. A culinary course for single mothers, she said, confused. Keanu nodded. It's free. It teaches professional cooking techniques and even helps with the business side of things. His eyes flicked toward Lily's drawing, still on the table in case you ever want to turn this into something bigger. Megan looked up at him, struggling to wrap her mind around what was happening. Why are you doing this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't even know us. KEANU held her gaze, his expression sincere. Because you deserve it. Because sometimes one act of kindness can change everything. Megan gripped the flyer, staring down at the words as though they were written in another language. She had long since buried dreams, abandoned them for the reality of survival. Lily, still holding her pencils, peeked up at her. Mama, will you learn new recipes like the ones Grandma used to make? Megan's breath hitched. She looked at the flyer, then at her daughter, then back at KEANU. Something shifted. It was faint, but it was there, a small ember of hope she had forgotten existed. She swallowed hard and nodded slowly. Maybe it's time to try. KEANU smiled. That's all I wanted to hear. Months passed. Megan took the course. At first, it was difficult balancing work, pregnancy, and motherhood, but with each lesson, she found herself rediscovering the passion she once had. Cooking wasn't just a skill, it was a piece of herself she had lost. KEANU, in the meantime, was working on something bigger. He made calls, gathered contacts, and found the perfect little space in the neighborhood. One morning, Megan and Lily arrived at an unfamiliar location. KEANU stood in front of a small storefront, his usual calm smile on his face. What is this? Megan asked, her heart pounding as she scanned the building. KEANU stepped aside, revealing a sign above the door. Elegant lettering read, La Cucina di Nonna. Megan froze. Shock flooded her system as she brought a trembling hand to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Lily clung to her arm, her voice trembling with excitement. Mama, it's your restaurant. Megan turned to KEANU, disbelief and overwhelming emotion etched into her face. You did this? Why? KEANU's expression softened. Because you deserve it. Because your story, your talent, he gestured at the small building they deserve to be seen. Because no one should have to give up on their dreams. Tears streamed down Megan's cheeks. She had never dared to believe something like this could happen. Together, they walked inside. The space was simple but perfect, a cozy kitchen, neatly arranged tables, and thoughtful details that reminded Megan of her grandmother's kitchen in Italy. Lily ran to a small children's corner where a little table had been set up with her colored pencils waiting for her. Megan ran her fingers over the smooth wooden counters, the reality of it sinking in. I don't know how to thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. KEANU shook his head. You don't have to. Just do what you do best, cook. Bring people together. And when the time comes, pass the kindness forward. The grand opening came just weeks later. Word spread quickly, and soon, the restaurant became a beloved gathering spot in the neighborhood. Megan poured her heart into every dish, crafting meals that told stories, recipes inspired by her grandmother, but with her own creative touch. Lily handed out menus, proudly telling customers about her mother's cooking. KEANU, always a quiet observer, sat at a corner table, watching with a satisfied smile. That evening, Megan brought a plate of lasagna to his table. She sat down across from him, her eyes filled with gratitude. I never imagined I'd be here, she admitted. KEANU glanced around at the warmth of the restaurant, the laughter of the customers, the joy in Megan's eyes. But you deserve to be. Megan smiled, blinking back tears. I'll never forget what you did for us. KEANU nodded, his voice steady. Then pass it on. Kindness is a cycle. Now you have the chance to change someone else's life. At that moment, Lily ran up, holding her latest drawing. It was of the restaurant, complete with customers and a sign outside that read, La Cucina di Nonna. Megan held the drawing close. She finally believed in something she hadn't in years hoped. And as KEANU stood to leave, one thing was clear: this was just the beginning. The soft glow of evening light filtered through the restaurant windows, casting a golden hue over La Cucina di Nonna. Inside, the warmth of a bustling kitchen blended with the laughter and chatter of happy customers. Megan moved with a renewed sense of purpose, arranging dishes with precision, each plate carrying not just food but a story, her story. Lily darted between tables, proudly handing out menus she had designed herself. The colored pencils KEANU had given her months ago were still her most treasured possession, and now they had helped bring her mother's dream to life. The little girl radiated joy as she introduced guests to her mother's cooking, speaking about the restaurant as if it were a magical place that had always existed. Keanu sat at his usual table in the corner, observing everything with quiet satisfaction. He had seen many things in his life: success, hardship, and fleeting moments of generosity, but this was different. This was proof that kindness had the power to transform. Megan approached him, a warm cup of coffee in hand. She placed it on the table with a playful smile. "You always sit in the same spot." Keanu chuckled, glancing around. "It's the best seat in the house. I can see everything." Megan slid into the chair across from him, her eyes scanning the restaurant. "I never could have imagined this," she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. "Not a day goes by that I don't thank you for what you've done for us. You changed everything." Keanu shook his head gently, his gaze steady and kind. "You changed everything, Megan." He gestured around the restaurant. "I just gave you a little push. You did the rest." Megan smiled, but her expression turned serious. "I'll never forget what you did for us, and I'll make sure to pay it forward." Keanu nodded. "That's all I could ever ask. Kindness is a cycle. Now you have the chance to be that change for someone else." At that moment, Lily appeared at the table, holding her sketchbook close to her chest. Her face glowed with excitement as she turned the book toward her mother. "Mama, look what I drew." Megan took the sketchbook and chuckled softly. It was a detailed drawing of the restaurant, but now it was complete, filled with happy customers, steaming plates of food, and outside a bold sign, the bold sign that read La Cocina di Nana. Megan's heart swelled. It was perfect. She pulled Lily into a tight hug, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. Just like this place." Keanu stood up, placing a few bills on the table. Megan glanced at him, her brows furrowing slightly. "I think it's time for me to go," he said simply. Megan's expression faltered. "Why?" "You're part of this, Keanu." He smiled softly. "I always will be. But this place is yours now. It's time for you to keep writing this story." Lily clutched her colored pencils tightly, looking up at him with wide, grateful eyes. "Will you come back?" Keanu crouched slightly, meeting her gaze. "Of course. I expect to see new drawings every time I visit." Lily beamed, nodding eagerly. Megan watched as Keanu turned toward the door, his presence as steady as it had been that first night at the gas station. As he walked away, she realized something profound. Her life had not just changed, it had transformed. And now she was ready to be the catalyst for someone else's transformation. Days turned into weeks, and La Cucina di Nana became more than just a restaurant. It became a beacon of hope in the community. The aroma of freshly prepared meals drifted through the streets, drawing people in not just for the food, but for the warmth that radiated from within. Customers came not only to eat, but to share stories, to connect, to feel like they belonged to something greater. The restaurant became a place of comfort, a place where people found more than just a meal. They found kindness and generosity woven into every dish. Megan, once burdened by exhaustion and survival, now thrived. She had always worked hard, but now her work had meaning beyond necessity. She was creating something that would outlive her struggles, something that would stand as a testament to perseverance and hope. And it wasn't just for her. She began to notice other single mothers, struggling families, young people with nowhere to turn. She saw reflections of herself in their tired eyes, in the way they carried invisible weights on their shoulders. And she knew exactly what she had to do. She started offering meals to those in need. No questions asked. She hired young people looking for a second chance, teaching them not just about food, but about dignity, self-worth, and believing in something bigger than themselves. She paid it forward. One evening, months after the grand opening, Megan stood at the counter watching as her team prepared for the dinner rush. Lily sat in the corner, drawing, her feet swinging beneath her chair. The restaurant was alive, filled with warmth, conversation, and laughter. Everything had changed, and yet it felt like it had always been meant to be. She looked down at the counter, where Keanu's old flyer for the culinary course still lay, a quiet reminder of where this journey had begun. And then, something caught her eye. Lily's latest drawing. It was of the restaurant, but this time there was something new, a second building next door with a sign that read, Hope Kitchen. Megan's breath caught in her throat. "What's this, sweetheart?" she asked, gently brushing her fingers over the paper. Lily looked up, grinning. "It's the next part of the dream, Mama. A place where people who need help can eat. Just like you helped me." Megan stared at the drawing, tears welling in her eyes. Hope Kitchen. She knew, in that moment, that the story wasn't over. It was just beginning. Because kindness wasn't just something you received. It was something you passed on. This story isn't just about a restaurant or a second chance, it's about the profound impact of kindness. One small act, one moment of compassion can change the trajectory of a life. Keanu didn't just offer help. He reminded Megan that she was worthy of dreaming again. And once she believed it, her life transformed not just for herself, but for everyone around her. We all carry burdens, and sometimes life makes us believe that survival is all we're meant for. But this story reminds us that no matter how heavy the struggle, hope is never truly lost. With a little kindness, with someone believing in us, we can rise above our hardships and create something beautiful, not just for ourselves, but for others. Kindness is a ripple. It spreads, it multiplies, it transforms. When we choose to help someone, we are not just giving them a moment of relief. We are giving them a future, a purpose, a reason to keep going. So be the reason someone dares to dream again. Be the reason someone believes in goodness, in possibility, in themselves. Because one act of kindness, it can change the world.